Can the people on Zoom hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I confirm I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just loading up the presentation. Right, thank you very much, everyone. So this application is for use of a field as a glamping site, and the field was most recently used for grazing horses. The use that is proposed now for permanent retention has already commenced on the site. The site benefits from permitted development rights for temporary works or events which last for no more than 28 days a year, but the time frame of occupation of the site has now gone beyond those 28 days. As you can see, the site's surrounded by fields within a very rural area, albeit with a small terrace of dwellings adjacent to the site. And here you can see a photo looking within the site to the existing buildings which are present. The timber building you can see there is an existing kennel type structure which is proposed to be retained and converted to provide proper toilet and kitchen facilities for the development. Beyond that, in the photo you can see here some existing porta cabin style toilets, but it's proposed with this application that they would be re-provided in a more permanent format within the existing building. You can also see here to the right hand side of the image one of the existing 2 green yurts which are present on site. And looking further into the site now, you can see the view beyond, which is within the AONB, and the 2 yurts which are proposed to remain as part of the camping offer. The site has, it is proposed that the site would be limited to 5 pitches overall, with the 2 yurts to remain over the winter and 3 tents to be erected each spring/summer for the camping season. The tents have previously been white tents, but following a recommendation from the AONB officer, it's now we're now proposing to secure by condition that the new tents, when put up next year, would be green to help modify the impact on the landscape. And so here we can see a site plan as proposed, which just highlights the location of the that kennel building, which we saw, the timber building within the site. And here is a proposed parking plan. The existing access to the site has been utilised for access to the campsite, but a formalised parking area hasn't been provided at this stage. It's proposed that a hard standing would be laid, which would allow parking for 6 vehicles. So a space each for each of the pitches, and an additional space for example, maintenance vehicles, which may be there at sometimes. The existing access on site, as I said, has been utilised. Through the course of consideration of the planning application, the Highway Authority have asked that visibility displays are provided to serve that access that are appropriate for the rural road on which it would be sited. The applicant has subsequently submitted this plan for us here showing the visibility, and they've also provided the visibility displays as shown on the plan already on site. And just to confirm that my recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Now we have some public speakers, members. I think we have Richard Tuck first on our list. So Richard, if you're there.
I am here, yes, thank you very much.
Excellent. The floor or the internet is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So my name is Richard Tuck and I live just to the west of the glamping site and Slade's Farm. In the slight picture we showed just a few minutes ago, pictures cropped very, very tightly to the edge of the site. We're just beyond the edge of that cropping and there are 5 homes along that edge. And those homes don't seem to be addressed at all in the resident amenity statements within this report submitted for this application. From a neighbour's perspective, I'll initially address the intrusive noise and disturbance that impacts on our ability to enjoy the peace and tranquility we should expect in our homes and gardens. The planning board is incorrect in its assumption that the operation is unlikely to give rise to noise and disturbance and that no complaints have been made. With only 4 minutes available, I will limit my examples to just a few at either end of the recent summer. After a very noisy weekend at the beginning of the season, a formal complaint was made to Waverley. On this occasion, there were 5 permanent tents, 2 yurts, 3 large white tents, but also additional tents were pitched to accommodate more people. As a Waverley reference, see 2020-00120 with reference to this report. After chasing for follow-up of the response we got from Waverley was, any investigation will be held in abeyance to allow the decision of planning to take place. And we waited the whole summer for this decision. Since then, neighbours have now taken upon themselves to contact the owners whenever noise levels raise above what is considered acceptable, either volume-wise or due to the late hour. Most recently, on August the 12th, a very large group rented all the tents for a celebration. This created noise all day on both Saturday and Sunday and late into Saturday evening. We did contact the operator of the site. They sent us a text message and did come and meet us the following morning. And they did apologise for the noise and apologised also that the booking was a mistake, an error, and would not happen again as they did not want to have large groups on site. The following weekend, August 20th, incredibly the same situation arose with a large group taking the whole site and resulting in significant noise. To their credit, the owners did come and tell us during the day a mistake had been made in the booking system, and again they'd booked a large group for the whole day. But unfortunately, knowing is only one part of the story. It does not negate the disturbance for our homes and our families. I'd also bring to your concern 3 areas of road safety. The new pedestrian access, again not mentioned in the comments, that the created onto the site into Thorcombe Street is put through a hedge on a very tight corner on Thorcombe Street with very poor visibility for both pedestrian and the drivers of cars. The additional volume created for this site must be linked and considered in conjunction with other activities of expanding in the area by the same family. The horse events on Slade's Farm can create tens of horse boxes leaving or entering the site, which caused log jams in the whole of Thorncombe Street. And the newly opened Hilltop Cafe is also creating significant extra pedestrian traffic on both Thorncombe Street and Alden's Lane. Together with overgrown verges and hedges, it's a very dangerous situation.
30 seconds left.
Okay, as a committee, I consider our application would of course request that you reject it, but trying to be open-minded, would ask for more consideration around the constraints or conditions put in place, particularly to require that the tents are not used for the whole of the year and limited just to the summer period. The buildings that are being modified and have already been modified to support this remain only adjacent and used with camping and limited just to the summer use.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much. We now have Janet Long to speak. Janet, are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Great, excellent. Please go ahead. 4 minutes.
Hi there.
It's Frank here, just the client with Janet. Thanks committee and everyone for being here. I'm going to let Janet read a statement, but I was just going to briefly respond just directly to Richard Tuck. Yeah, as mentioned, we had a number of evenings, probably 3 this season, which produced more noise than normal. I just want to query one point, which is that we've never ever had an extra pitch alongside the existing 5. I'm not sure where that info came from, but we're explicit about that, and that's never happened. In terms of the noise, for us, this is definitely super important, and there was an issue last summer. Essentially, so there were 3 evenings this year which were noisy, and that was because we hadn't put in place the policy in our booking system, which limits groups being able to book. So these were groups who organized themselves early in the year because they're a big group, and they booked in January. We hadn't changed our booking policy to stop people like that, and unfortunately they slipped through the net. But it should also be added that there is some noise, but it's not dramatic, and you know, once it's no worse than what's coming kind of from the horse stables. But that aside, once we removed the ability for those groups to book, for example, the last 2 weeks in September, the last week, that it's been dead silent despite being full, and that's because different families book different tents, and there's almost like a self-policing silence issue because groups can't do it, and that's going to be our policy going forward. And so since we changed that policy, it really has been quiet. So Richard's only highlighted the isolated scenarios. It's not every night of the summer, despite the fact we've been full every night of the summer. It's 3 incidents, and our booking policy now solves that. And I'll just hand over to Janet.
Good evening. Just like to say this is a low impact form of development which can be carried out without any harm. Previously, this was a horse paddock. The field in which the glamping site takes place is part of the Thorncombe Street project, which is a programme that brings together the Surrey Wildlife Trust, the AONB, the Land App, and numerous other organisations to support biodiversity. As part of the project, it's proposed that an additional 250 metres of new hedge planting will be planted, and this will create wildlife corridors and new habitats. It's also proposed to plant wildlife meadows. As can be seen from the photographs, the glamping site is limited to 3 tents and 2 yurts, and these structures are set within the field that's been allowed to regenerate. So overall, there are considerable biodiversity enhancements. This steps towards farm diversification, which is absolutely essential for Slade's farm to support the running costs of the farm and associated land maintenance. And in this respect, the development is explicitly supported by national policy and broader government aims to encourage rural business. And thanks to this specific case of farm diversification, the applicants are undertaking steps towards ecological restoration and regeneration. There's definitely been support from visitors this season, and I think that's important to note that that is local spend that goes into the local area. We also note that the Surrey Hills have explicitly supported holiday accommodation in the AONB boundary, and it recognises the benefits that do accrue from visitors. I think this needs to be taken into account in the determination of the application. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And now Councillor Seaborn as Ward Councillor. And Councillor, I understand that you may want also to sum up at the end, if you wish.
Possibly, but I think the committee will be able to handle that themselves.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Chair. I called the application in as one of the ward members following submission of a large number of objections shortly after the application was first submitted in November. There are a number of planning reasons to consider that I included in my call-in request, but I think these have been addressed in the officer report for the most part, so I'm happy to accept those arguments made by the officer. I have a lot of sympathy for the economic case for allowing this application, particularly given the economic challenges that the COVID pandemic has brought to the large estates and the benefits to shops and eating and drinking establishments in Bramley. Of the objections, which come from nearly 40 different addresses, many have come from residents outside of Bramley Parish, particularly from Hascombe residents, some of whom have notionally linked the Slade's Farm application with a similar application at Langhurst Farm in Hascombe Parish. These objections, for the most part, cover perfectly reasonable generic concerns. But as I said before, I think the officer report addresses the issues raised. And while I don't agree that the roads in the area are suitable to support this kind of business, the application has the support of the Highways Authority, so I'm not going to pursue that argument further. During the time the site has been open for business under permitted development rights, I'm not aware of any complaints being made to Bramley Parish Council, but we have heard that Waverley have received noise complaints. So I think the biggest issue that you need to consider this evening is the concerns expressed by near neighbours over noise levels. The residents of Thorncombe Barn, Thorncombe Farm and Stonelands, located some 200 metres north of the glamping sites, have all made similar points. If I can quote from their objections, there have been multiple instances of noise intrusions, including one occasion when a large group staying for several nights and proceeded to party into the early hours, shouting, cheering, chanting and singing. We were unable to sleep with our windows open and the noise continued through the duration of their stay, including during the daytime. Glamping site is so close to the home that we have even low-level conversations can be heard distinctly. The acoustics of the area, being a valley, mean that the sound carries more clearly and further than in normal circumstances and does create circumstances. And then another objection said, having endured the glamping site from July to October 2020, which included campfires many nights of the week, barbecues, noise during the afternoon and evenings, and particularly at weekends, and one all-night party, it would seem totally inappropriate for such a venture to be close to 9 homes. And the third point, my main concern for the application concerns noise. The site is located in a valley and noise carries more readily across a valley than if it were on level ground. During the summer of 2020, when the glamping site was in use, there was at least one occasion when a group of campers disturbed neighbours into the early hours. So these concerns conflict with our environmental health officer's assessment and suggests that the application is in conflict with SAVE policy D1 part C. You'll have noticed that there are a few letters of support. These, as far as I can tell, come from either the applicant's family or their tenants. And of course, they're valid, but it would appear that there are no truly independent letters of support. So just to sum up the things I think you should be considering this evening, you need to consider the balance between a significant body of objection over very understandable generic concerns, which I feel have been addressed in the report. The concerns based on the experiences of residents of nearby properties regarding excessive and intrusive noise levels, indicating the application conflicts with SAVE policy D1 part C, and the economic benefits to the applicants and to the businesses in Bramley. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. So, members, we have a proposal for change of use from agricultural land to glamping site, change of use and alterations to barn to provide ancillary kitchen and toilet shower facilities, as amplified by transport statement received 17th December 2020 at Slades Farm, Thorncombe Street, Bramley. I forgot to read that out first. But the recommendation, the officer's recommendation in front of us is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 10 and informatives 1 to 4. May I have questions? I have Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned about the noise aspect, having heard the people objecting, person objecting, which is contrary, as Councillor Seaborn has said, to on page 15 to the Council's Environmental Health Officer's views. Can I ask a question as to? I note the applicant is going to change their regulations so no one group can book all 5 spots. But I suppose they could be misled because 5 families could book simultaneously and they wouldn't know that they were related. And the second, well, and that's a comment, but the question is, can we, either as a condition or an informative or something, ensure that there can't be a group booking for the whole site? Because that seems to be the problem. Somebody has a big birthday or a big celebration, they book the whole site, and then party commences. And I accept entirely that if you've got 5 different families on site, they'll regulate it themselves, because one tent will tell the other tent to shut up and be quiet. So could I ask officers whether we can, with conditions, in any way stipulate that there will only be different families not related? I can't anticipate how we could put it on, but I would ask that question.
Thanks, Councillor. I guess the issue is noise rather than relations, but Kate, would you comment, please?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we've had a little discussion about it. I would have concerns with a condition in relation to limiting group bookings, in that it may not pass the 6 tests of a condition of being specific and necessary and enforceable particularly. But that said, I think noise being the primary issue, it would perhaps be of comfort to appreciate that for management reasons as well as for economic reasons, a condition is recommended for any consent granted to be personal to the applicant and their family. So in that respect, it's not anticipated that there would be any change in the management of the operation from the sort of quite clear measures that the applicant has already put in place and is just starting to see the benefits. Thank you.
Chairman, certainly there was a suggestion that it could be done via informative, and would be very happy to add an informative to the applicant to suggest that we would want to hold them to their policy of not having large group bookings on the site. But we don't believe it would meet the tests of reasonable or necessary to put a condition on, but an informative certainly happy to do so.
Okay, Councillor Goodridge, are you happy with that? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I have a couple of queries. First of all, this is the alteration of a barn into kitchen, toilet, shower facilities. I'm assuming that there is no waste there at the moment, and there appears to be nothing from Thames Water to state about, you know, how this sewage is going to be disposed of, or whether or not there is the facility for sewage to be discharged into a public sewer around there. So should there not be, then this would obviously require a lot more movement in the land, and which would obviously have an impact on biodiversity, and I don't even know if it, you know, potentially the removal of hedgerows even to be able to get the sewage into the area. My other concern, which I have raised in advance, Chairman, you'll be pleased to know, with officers, is to do with the access and the increase in the visibility displays. Now, I know Thorncombe Street quite well, and I've gone down it through Google Earth today, and there are quite a few hedgerows and there's a few trees around, and I'm not sure that the visibility displays will involve the removal of hedgerow or the removal of a tree. And I think that this application should have on it the access as well. I don't know why we're considering it just as a converted barn when it does involve change to the access. So I feel myself that I can't actually, although I'm quite sympathetic towards, you know, diversification of farmland into other uses. However, I feel that I cannot support or object to this application this evening because I simply don't have enough information about the sewage and also about the access road and what that will do. There have been reports, it was mentioned earlier, about the Badger, I forget what they're called now, the organisation, the Protection of Badgers organisation. Thank you. And that there are badgers nearby. Now, I don't know whether this hedgerow runs through a badger set, you know, so I can't actually in any way vote on this application. In fact, I would almost say that this application should actually be deferred until we have more information about how that access road is going to be managed and created. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So in relation to the question regarding sewage, and we've had information from the applicant confirming that it would be connected to the existing management and sewage management operation and existing facilities to support Slade's farm, and the applicant's satisfied that and the existing septic tank capacity would be sufficient to support that. In relation to the issue of the visibility space and the access, just to confirm, the access is an existing access which predated the start of the glamping operations on site. When the application was originally submitted, that access didn't, and when I initially visited the site, that access didn't have visibility displays provided, but they have since actually been physically provided on site. So in effect, any obstruction above the relevant height, which I think is a metre, from memory, it has already been removed on site. So in effect, in granting permission, there's no impact on biodiversity. Obviously, permission isn't needed to remove trees outside of the planning process. And yes, that's the answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Councillor Townsend, any come back?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the hedgerow, if there were any hedgerows there, they could have been ancient hedgerows, we don't know. So they could have been protected. So what you're saying is that all the work to create those visibility displays has actually already been carried out. I'm a little concerned about relying on the knowledge of a layperson to be able to assess the capacity of the sewage system. And I think that there should have been something, because there could be a lot of people on this site. You know, if you've got one tent, there could be potentially 4 people within each tent. So I do think that, you know, that there should be perhaps of something done to ensure that there was sufficient capacity to deal with the waste from the glamping area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Kate, Zach, comments?
Yeah, I was just, I've got a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Townsend has said. I was wondering if it, similarly as we have got a number of conditions requiring details to be submitted before the 2022 season, when this is intended to sort of really start in earnest as a permanent scheme from April. I'm wondering if a condition requiring details of disposal of waste and management of waste would be an appropriate condition to place on this for details to be submitted to and approved in writing by the local authority. That might get, I take the point that yes, we've asked the applicant and they're confident that it can be achieved, but it would be helpful to have those details and for us to be satisfied on that point. And I think that would meet relevant tests given the level of usage that could be on the site. And obviously, I take your point about if the hedgerow is gone, it's difficult to condition that. But what we're looking at, I suppose, is an existing access that could have been used for agricultural purposes with large vehicles coming on and off the site, uncontrolled. And I suppose that one of the benefits of this is that it does provide the visibility displays and a betterment, albeit I don't know the site and I appreciate it's probably still not ideal in terms of highways, but if the Highways Authority don't object and feel that visibility space are acceptable, I think we have not much wiggle room in that regard.
Thanks, Zach. Councillor Townsend, that extra condition?
Yes, I would very much welcome that extra condition. Thank you, Chair.
And if members think that's appropriate at this stage, we can. Nobody doesn't like the idea. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Now I have Councillor Baker and then Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. I would be interested to know, because I wasn't able to hear, I'm sorry to say, not for lack of attention, but I couldn't hear what Zach's response was dealing with the informative, which was in response to another councillor's concern. So please, could I have that repeated? And then I think there is another question I want to ask, if you would bear with me. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Baker. Yeah, well, it's very rare that anyone says they can't hear me, so I'll take that as a compliment. Basically what we were saying was we don't feel that we could place a condition on this regarding groups, but we certainly understand that the personal permission that's proposed to be granted means that we know who would be running the facility rather than a normal planning permission, which is could be transferred to others, and they've mentioned their policy. What we would intend to do is put an informative on, reminding them of their policy, and that we would seek to urge them to comply with that policy of their own.
Councillor Baker, your other question, is that okay? Councillor?
Yes, I just wanted to hear it.
Right.
And if I may come back
Yep,
when
please
we're
do.
not asking questions,
Oh,
I
okay.
think that would be
All right.
helpful.
Well, in that case, we move on to Councillor Gale and then Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I see under condition number 3, there's no amplified or recorded music shall be played on the site. Should there be a curfew on anything that is noise? The other thing is, are we able to limit the number of persons that are actually on the site at any one time? 6 tents or 5 tents, how many people can you have in each tent? I mean, how many do they book? If there's 4 people per tent, that's not too many. But if they wanted to book 20 people per tent, then you've got quite a party going on at night. And from the reports that we heard earlier, it seems there was a lot of noise, which probably means there were quite a few people on site at that time. Is there a condition we can have for that?
Thanks, Councillor Gale. Kate, I guess we're coming back to the noise issue here, noise limitation.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Gale. In relation to imposing a curfew in terms of use of the site, separate to the noise condition, I think that might be hard from an enforceability perspective, given that the site will continue to be occupied in that time, and that's sort of intrinsic to the use. And the boundary, I suppose, amplified music aside, as to what noise is and isn't acceptable, isn't necessarily a clear one. So I would have some initial concerns about how to prepare a specific condition to address that. And in relation to the issue of the size of the tents, the photos showed the yurts as they are now and as they are proposed to be next season, and the tents, when I've seen them in the summer months, are a similar size. They're I suppose self-limiting in the size of the tents, in the number of people who can actually sleep in them, given the constraints and given the fact that the applicant hasn't encouraged or allowed additional pitches beyond those 5 for additional visitors to the site. So in that respect, I don't think necessarily with a restriction on the number of tents, there's a necessity for a restriction on the actual number of people occupying them.
Thanks, Kate. Councillor Gale, you want to come back?
Yeah, just coming back on that, this is a tent, it's a campsite. There's nothing stopping people's friends all pitching up and joining them for the evening, even though it may have been set out for just 4 people to be in the tent. There should be a restriction surely on the number of people that could visit the tent, for instance. If 40 people decided to turn up to visit their friends, what's the restriction?
Well, I imagine they'd be charged for that, but Kate, do we have?
Well, I think occupation will be set by the size of the tent. I mean, taking it to its argument, there would be nothing stopping the people in those 5 houses having big parties in their gardens and barbecues, with 40, 50 people. And I would repeat one fact is that, the use of this site for up to 28 days for this purpose in any calendar year would be permitted. What we have here is concerns, and I get that from local residents, but equally we don't have records, albeit the guest speaker did mention that they had put in a complaint, but environmental health don't have concerns. And I think with the controls as set out in the conditions, I think this is a reasonable approach.
So moving on to Councillor Darcy and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually visited the site on Monday and I was slightly surprised to discover that the parking area has already been constructed, which isn't the impression you get from reading the notes. It says a new bound hard standing would be provided. Well, it has been. So I'm slightly curious as to how it is that we're giving permission for something that's already been done. And it's given the impression that it hasn't already been done.
Okay, sorry, go on.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, well, thank you for updating me and the members because I haven't visited over the last week. So it sounds like alongside providing the visibility displays as shown on the plans, they've already provided the hard standing. We do occasionally see retrospective applications, and particularly with a use like this, where in effect it is allowed to go ahead for 28 days a year without any permission. They can sometimes sort of continue on without the permission whilst they're seeking the permission. And we obviously, did determine the application accordingly. But I stand to your judgment, having been to the site more recently than I have with regards to the parking area.
And I would say one of the conditions, condition 9, requires that the parking area to be provided in accordance with the drawing that was submitted. Obviously, we'd need to check whether or not it has been provided in accordance with that. But there's nothing to stop the council determining a part retrospective application. It's perfectly standard thing. We do get a lot of retrospective applications. Obviously, we would have preferred that not been done yet, but provided it's been done in accordance with the approved plans and permission is granted, then that's fine. If permission is not granted, then we'll have to pass that on to our enforcement team to investigate. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, Councillor Darcy for that.
Oh yeah, there's just one other question, which was what's the difference between 28 days and 6 months? That's my point. So when you say that 28 days, they would have permission to do, we're talking here about 6 months, which is 6 times as long, isn't it?
Yes, but we feel it's acceptable in planning terms. Thank you.
I mean, I would say that the planning legislation in terms of enforcement, if that's what the query is around, it doesn't give us sort of the ability necessarily to immediately jump in and take enforcement action when a breach occurs. And quite often the applicant would be given the opportunity, and it would be unreasonable of us as a planning authority not to give them the opportunity to submit a planning application and for that application to be considered prior to making any decision around any potential enforcement breach. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be quite quick, actually. The one thing I have got to think about is permeable parking areas, and I was going to ask if that had been a condition of that parking area. And the second thing I'd like to say is try to put the thing in context. Recently, it has been very difficult for families and friends to get together. And quite a lot of these people have been raucous when they have got together because I haven't seen them for a long time. I really do not think, if somebody asked me, I would put a stag or hen do in Bramley when Brighton's down the road and a variety of other places. So I think it might be just the excitement of being allowed to meet with your friends again that has carried people away on this particular site.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Denis. And I have no other speakers. So, Councillor Frazuski, do you say you'd like to? Can I get Councillor Denis first? I didn't see if you put your hand up.
No, I wasn't indicating.
Okay, thank you.
But I do support the application. Thank you. I really hate it when people put retrospective applications in, having done everything, totally disregarding planning system and then put an application in. I just think it's a shame that people do that, and we should be able to charge them 10 times the amount for the application. I've had my moan about that. Can I just quickly go to the visibility sprays, which is sort of under the proposed parking layout details, which is page 10 of our document. And it's just if I've got this right, because it's quite difficult with the detail on these documents. Am I correct in saying the visibility sprays is indicated by the pinkish line? Mine's in colour when I got on. So that's the line which is the left of the two lines that have a slight bend, and you've got like the X, which I presume means the car. X. Right, so if looking at that then, so if I've got that correct, if you look at the bottom, as that line bends round, it appears to cross over what I'm guessing is the verge of the road, and the visibility display then shows in the middle of the road. So at that point, it crosses over the verge, and along that line, not having been there recently, is that completely unobscured? Because otherwise you're going to be seeing through a hedge, or what else is there? So just for my benefit, thanks, Kate.
Yeah, certainly. So to the bottom of the page, as you look at that plan, it is all open and open to the highway, with the smaller sort of rectangular structures you can see there being a line of garages. So it's all open at the front there. In relation to the other side, there was initially sort of low level vegetation and ivy, but also 2 trees in that location, but those trees have now been removed. So it is, you know, I haven't carried out an exact inspection measuring to confirm it complies with the submitted details, but the trees have been removed, so it does look that it provides displays as indicated on the plan. And that there's also was a pre-existing quite large bell mouth into the site from the road in any case, but they've just cleared back a little further.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, and I don't know whether we actually need this, but do we need a condition to actually say that that visibility spray, as you know, especially as if it's not kept, it doesn't take long for weeds and bits of plants to grow up, and if that was the case, you would only have 2/3 of your visibility. Some sort of condition that ensures that the visibility space, if it's included already, Zach, I'm quite happy, but if not, just to say yes.
Zach, yeah,
no,
please.
I'm absolutely fine with that. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, councillors. Now, no more questions. I think Councillor Baker had wished to make a comment, but yes.
I do, but I'm happy to wait for local members to have a go first, Chairman.
Councillor Seaborn, do you want to sum up?
No, I think the discussions are clear and everyone knows what the issues are. You know, there's an on-balance here, and it's for members to decide what the balance is. Thank you.
Thanks. So let me come back to Councillor Baker then. Yeah, and I've got Councillor Darcy as well. Councillor Baker, did you had a comment?
Well, I wanted to speak to the actual proposal that we grant consent.
Okay.
So if you'd like me to go now?
Yep.
I will go now.
Go
Thank
now.
you very much.
Well, I'm gonna stay here, but
Yes. Right. I went through this very carefully because I see that certainly people who have been cooped up during COVID would be very glad to get away for a cheap weekend. And I thought about the impact on this particular area of that activity. So I was bearing in mind the desirability of getting people into the countryside. So this is to me an on-balance thing. I have a great concern, I have to say, about the number of people who will be on site if there are 3 tents and 2 yurts. I imagine that actually you wouldn't. You're leaving it to the management to decide whether they can restrict the numbers in the tents particularly. There is nothing here that says that the size of the tents will be constrained and therefore the numbers of people. So that's one thing I want to say. There's been a lot of concern expressed from the objectors about noise. Now, I know that noise on campsites is virtually unenforceable in this borough. I have experienced it for myself. The police do not act, and our emergency officer has very limited powers to do anything. And in my village, we were kept awake until 6 o'clock in the morning by the family of the owner of a nearby site who invited lots of people to camp. There was amplified music until 6 in the morning. Nobody could do anything. I mean, I really do speak from experience here. So I just don't think that the condition about amplified or recorded music is enforceable. I just don't see that happening. When I look at the conditions, I see that we're actually, as a minor point, we are being asked to leave the lighting to the officers. Nobody has mentioned the lighting, but that hasn't been included in the drawings, or there's no specifications as to lighting. It is really a serious concern, I think, in rural areas. People do want dark skies. Parking, I think I'm not going to comment on. And I think the applicants were saying that, that they were encouraging biodiversity. But actually, biodiversity can be encouraged without having a planning consent. You can do it anyway. So I don't really, while it's laudable to do, I don't think it really needs to be part of this. They should just be doing it, in my view. Now, the condition that really concerns me, which is why I wanted to hear what Zach said again, was about the nature of the consent. And that is that it is a personal consent. But it's a personal consent to the owner of the site, his first degree relations, his staff. I think there's one more category, which I thought really was Uncle Tom Copley and all at the end of the day, because my experience was that a site had been, the opportunities the site presented was abused by the children of the owner of a site. That doesn't happen in every case, but the fact that it is a personal condition tells me that the conditions of the other conditions of the application do not go anywhere near far enough to actually ensure that there isn't a very serious impact potentially on the amenity of the residents nearby. So that is what I am very concerned about. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Now I have Councillor Darcy and Councillor Reid, and I can't remember which order, in for their comments. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair, but I do think Councillor Darcy precedes me, really.
Sorry, Councillor Darcy, you're on the floor.
That's very kind, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the arrangements for toilets and kitchen facilities, because at the moment, when I was there, I could see there were 2 temporary buildings, which I presume one of them had gas canisters. I presume that was for kitchen facilities, and the other one was toilet facilities. Now, it does seem to me that the building, that the stable or whatever it was, is rather small, that they're proposing to convert. And if you look at the measurements, I'm assuming that's millimeters that they're given. We're in talking about toilet and shower that's going to be less than 3 meters by 2 for 5 tents. And the tents, I have to say, were very large. When I was, I mean, I haven't been camping for many years. When I was a Boy Scout, we used to have tents that would take 6 people. And these, the ones I could see there in the yurts in particular, I would say were 3 to 4 times bigger than that. Now, admittedly, Scouts probably get closer together than most people would want to, but it suggests to me that it could be 4 to 5 people easily in each of those tents. So what we're talking about here is we're up to 25 people potentially. One, I mean, I don't know how many toilets they're proposing, but I can't imagine it'd be more than 1 or 2. Also, the kitchen facility opens straight onto the toilet, which I thought was not allowed. I thought you had to have 2 doors because of environmental health. However, I mean, I'm not an expert in that, so I'll defer, but nevertheless, I did notice that and thought it was a bit odd. So that would be my concern. I don't think the facilities are actually big enough. And it would, certainly there'd be an issue with the sewage, I would have thought, if they're only allowing for 1 toilet and they've got 25 people queuing up to use it, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor.
That's my comment.
I have a vision in front of me, and I think I might leave that for the time being. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I'm coming at this from a different point of view in a way. I've lived on a farm. I've only lived in about 2 houses that haven't had septic tanks. I support farms and the diversity that they are going to have to undertake for economic reasons. You've probably heard me say this before. And from what I've heard this evening, and considering this particular application, although there has been noise, I believe that the applicant has been compliant and has apologized. And you know, they are working with the Surrey Hills. I'm on the board of the AONB, and I commend them for that. And because of their behaviour, I have confidence that they will develop this in a very responsible way. The 3 incidents have been apologised for. And with the new conditions in place, I believe that, you know, they could probably make a good go of it. So I'm going to support them. This is the countryside. It's not that big. It's not like a great big campsite that I've ever, you know, I've stayed on the south of France, but they've been enormous with guards. So this is just camping in the countryside, as far as I'm concerned. 3 tents and 2 yurts, and they aren't applying for any more. So really, I can't say any more. That I just support it, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Now I have Councillor Forosiewski, last comment, I think, and then we'll move to a decision.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I will be brief because we've spent quite a lot of time on this. I completely and utterly agree with the sensible conversation that Councillor Reid has just come out with. On the scale of things, this is a small application. There's a couple of things there with regards retrospective with the parking, but they could have done that anyway because they already had buildings there that they could have used it for. I look at the report and I think it's a good report. I'm satisfied that the conditions and informatives can overcome some of the concerns already raised. I look at the consultations. Surrey hasn't objected. Bramley Parish Council hasn't objected. And when I look at the way that people in and around the area behave in places like, I'm not going to mention, but we've had to put up with people having parties till God knows what time in the early hours of the morning, people letting off fireworks till 11, 12 o'clock at midnight. You know, I mean, that's antisocial behaviour and that's got to be dealt with in a very different way. But I've got every faith, like Councillor Reid, that the persons responsible will manage it and manage it well. And if they don't, as a council, we can act in accordance by using the powers we have. So I wholeheartedly support this recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor. So if we move then to the recommendation, The recommendation before us is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions.
Excuse me, Chairman. Sorry, but Martin, Councillor Darcy asked a couple of questions which I'd quite like to know the answer to before we come to our conclusion, perhaps.
Sorry, Councillor Darcy, which questions have you not had a response on?
Well, it was about the toilets and the kitchen. The fact that, yeah, is that what you mean? The fact that the kitchen is not separated by 2 doors between the toilet and the kitchen, and the fact that they're both very small, considering the number of people who are using them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Zach, go ahead.
I'll come back on the separation of the kitchen and the toilet. I mean, that's covered under separate legislation. We shouldn't be considering that in planning terms. The size of the building is small, but you know, as you say, you probably fit a couple of toilets and the shower in the space that you've got there, 3 by 2. If members were really concerned about it, we could ask for details to be submitted as an additional condition for approval. But you know, they've been operating, and obviously the applicant feels that that's sufficient for their business. I don't, and apologies, I didn't actually see those as questions. I thought they were just sort of statements of
Can I just clarify that it is acceptable for us to give permission to something which we know to be illegal? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're sorry, Councillor Darcy. I think you're misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the drawing is a drawing of what they're proposing. But if they change that internal layout of that building, that wouldn't require planning permission. So if they were to move the door and have a separate second door, they could do that. What I'm saying is you shouldn't really be bothering yourself about this. This is not a reason to withhold planning permission, because there's other legislation that covers that, environmental legislation. It's not a planning consideration as such.
Thanks, Zach. Now, sorry, Kate, you're going to say something.
No, I was just going to confirm there's one additional condition now recommended and one additional informative, so that would increase the total.
Well, let me just pick up Councillor Ellis and.
I apologise, Chairman. I do have some concerns about this application. It's a large area. Clearly, it's become popular. Could I just have confirmation that should the people wish to increase the number of tents, yurts, whatever you call it, they have to come back to the planning authority for permission? Thank you.
Zach, yeah.
Yes, we can confirm that, because there's a condition limiting use of the site to no more than 5 pictures at any one time. So yes, I can give you that reassurance, Councillor. Okay,
so members, we come back then to the recommendation and your choices. The planning permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 11. No, Kate, and informatives 1 to 5. Did we have an extra informative in there?
That's correct. So just for members' benefit, I'll just repeat that the additional condition was to require details of the waste treatment of waste material from the site to be submitted to and approved in writing by the authority prior to the commencement of the 2022 season in April, and we'll come up with a suitable wording for that. And the informative was around not allowing large parties to block book the 5 tents, and that would be the informative 5. Sorry, hopefully that's clear.
Yep, that's fine by me. Okay, members, then the planning permission be granted. May I see those in favour? Those against? And unless I missed anybody, any abstentions? Georgina?
8 in favour, 2 against, 1 abstention. So it's carried.
So that's carried. Members, thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we take a break at this point for 5 or 10 minutes, because that was quite a long time. And well, none of us are getting any younger. And So can we do that? Just take a comfort break. They do it in tennis games these days. Okay. ~7. Yes. All right, members. I think we're back online now. Right, so. Oh. Okay.
She's doing the next presentations.
I know, right. I look to my left and to my right, but not straight ahead. Members, we're waiting for an officer to come back, but in the absence of that, item 7.2, A2, WA 2020-1685, Yard Farm Barn. The proposal is change of use from agricultural barn to light industrial use class E and storage and distribution. And we are very grateful for Kate to be able to lead us through it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies for a few issues with me setting up the system there. So the application is for conversion of 2 existing barns which are attached from agricultural use to a storage industry. A storage and distribution or light industrial use within the new use class E, which combines those uses. So here we can see a site plan with the application site outlined in red and the extent of the additional land owned by the applicant in blue. As you can see there's 2 barns, the front of which adjacent to the highway is enclosed, and the rear building currently being a pole barn. The sites within Ewhurst Ward in a quite rural area. It lies opposite to an existing livery, I believe, a stables to the opposite side of the road, which comprises a number of farm buildings, which are mostly brick. So looking at some photos here of the application site, the photo you can see to the left there is along the lane. So as you can see, it's a rural area and a rural lane. The red brick building you can see is within the existing stables to the opposite side of the road, and the application premises is the building you can see there, which has part timber and part corrugated cladding. And just another view here of the buildings to the opposite side of the road. So here we can see a proposed site plan. It's proposed that 2 existing accesses would be utilised to serve the development, albeit with slightly modified siting of the northernmost access. And parking would be provided with the layout as shown here, with both staff parking and spaces for delivery vehicles. And here you can see a proposed plan for the buildings. It's anticipated that 4 units would be created within the existing buildings. And changes to the elevations are proposed, which are very similar to the changes approved most recently to the site, some members may recall, which allowed cladding of the pole barn to the rear. So in effect, there would be timber cladding established to that barn. And to confirm, the recommendation is that permission is granted subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks very much. Now, I understand that we have some public speaking arranged on this. We have Mr. or Mrs. Tappin to comment. If I Is it Mr. or Mrs. that will?
It's Mrs.
Right, Mrs. Tappin, please go
Mrs.
ahead. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. As owner of Yard Farm, we oppose the proposal on the grounds of safety, noise and increased traffic. The footprint of the barn opposite Yard Farm is large, and B8 and E-class usage would open business options and permit an increase in usage and traffic to and from the site. It would also be totally out of keeping in this beautiful rural environment. There are currently at least 6 livery businesses within a 1-mile radius of this proposal. And these businesses are viable because the roads are quiet, and those that travel on North Breach Lane know they're likely to meet a horse on their journey. North Breach Lane is a single track country lane, and it can be difficult for 2 small cars to pass at the best of times. A lorry means that a vehicle has to drive on the verge, which gets carved up in the winter months. And visibility is poor, particularly as one turns left from the proposal up the hill towards the junction between Lower Breach Lane and Plough Lane. Horses are unpredictable, and sudden noises or unexpected vehicles driving perhaps at speed can startle them, and their reactions can be unpredictable and dangerous. Children frequently ride on these roads on North Breach Lane, and the thought of a fatal accident fills me with horror. Walkers and cyclists are also frequent users of this road. It would likely put an end to the livery business, which is Charles Equestrian, operating from Yard Farm, which employs 4 staff and which supplies the local infrastructure, farmers delivering haylage and hay, farriers, physios and vets, as well as supporting the well-being of riders who choose to keep their horses here. And there are about 18 horses currently housed at Yard Farm. No one would choose to keep their horse opposite a place with a high volume of large vehicles coming or going, or opposite a place with unpredictable noises, because the horses will spook. It will also damage the bed and breakfast business operating from Yard Farm, which is the red brick building opposite the pictures shown. Visitors seek peace and tranquility, which this area boasts, and they won't want to be staying opposite a large industrial barn. Class E is now broad and encompasses any industrial process. It doesn't now stipulate it to be light industrial. And any industrial use would irreversibly change the view from the Surrey Hills and change the rural feel of this beautiful part of the country, being in an area of outstanding natural beauty, which you all know. There is currently a fire hazard in the form of a large bonfire a short distance from where horses are housed on this new site. And additionally, as far as we are aware, there is no water supply to this site. There are no sewage facilities and no drainage. Was a bat survey ever done? It was requested, but it may not have happened because of COVID. Certainly we have plentiful bats. So we urge the council to decline this proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Tappin. That's very kind. And now Lawrence Simmons, please.
Hello.
Go ahead, Mr. Simmons.
The host has stopped the video. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Simmons.
But the host has stopped the video.
All
right, thank you. Thank you for starting it.
All right, well done.
Okay, since acquiring these barns, the owners become only too aware of the local community's concerns about the tranquility in the special rural area. There will be no heavy-duty, noisy or noxious industrial uses such as car building, motor workshop activity. The new Class E does not include the full range of industrial activities. It simply doesn't. And the use chosen and specified and fully controllable by the council is a direct lift from the previous former B1 A to C use classes, which were specifically designed to sit comfortably alongside housing. The old B1 A to C office, light research and development, and those that don't produce noise, vibration, smell, fume, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit. So there'd be no startling noises, no grinding of cars or anything like that. Tenants have already been lined up. There will be no detrimental effects on amenity, be like furniture repairers, small scale upholsterers, and the storage of events equipment. Traffic will be far lighter than was associated with the old horse-related activities. And the whole activity profile would be wholly supported by adopted Waverley local plan policy, which supports the reuse of agricultural buildings for commercial purposes. So the proposal as chosen by the applicant is fully supported by the local plan. Road safety has been very carefully looked at, and we've retained traffic consultants who incidentally also have worked for County Council. And the access points have been chosen because they're already there. They've been used in the past by equestrian related businesses. Now, it's worth stressing this, that if the use of the barns were to revert to equestrian, now there are 20 stables in those barns, and you can imagine 20 horse owners and their vehicle movements, all grades of vehicles, big vehicles with tack, hay, feed, and taking away foulage, would be using those access points at all hours and in large volumes. Well, I can reassure the council and the neighbours that the traffic movements related to the proposed use will be far less than that related to the past use, which was equestrian use. Now, further assurance is given by the county because there is coming up a default reduction in speed limit to 40 miles an hour on all of Surrey's rural roads, and that could be brought in as soon as the spring. And I think anybody who seeks to drive beyond 30, 35 miles an hour on that particular length of North Breach Lane would be absolute fool. The look of the buildings has been retained to continue to blend, and to sum up, this is an application which ticks every single policy box, and I recommend it thoroughly to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. And now very pleased to say, we move to Joanna Cadman, Clerk of Ewhurst Parish Council. Joanna.
Thank you, Chairman. The Parish Council has a number of concerns regarding this application and concurs with the objections raised by local residents. The site is not within the green belt, as suggested by the applicant in the design and access statement. Green belt policies do not apply here, as the appeal inspector noted in 2017 when he dismissed the residential use appeal. We would, as a rule, support the reuse of old buildings, but the environmental impacts of the proposal, moving from agricultural to industry in an isolated location away from services, workforce housing, and other light industrial uses, would represent an uncharacteristic development in this countryside and AGLV setting. The site is unsustainable in terms of its location away from trunk roads and housing, such that its development for industrial use would generate significant additional commuting and commercial traffic along unsuitable and narrow country lanes, creating an unacceptable hazard for walkers riders and cyclists, and a significant environmental impact. The loss of amenities to the neighbours who run a livery business is considerable. The site entrance is directly opposite that of the livery stable, which is in constant use by horses, riders and children. And the potential of a large lorry meeting an inexperienced rider leaving the stables is very real and could have very serious consequences. Ewhurst Parish Council objects to this application.
Thanks, Joanna. Okay, Kate, can you make a comment at this point, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and apologies for not mentioning earlier when I did the presentation, but I would just like to recommend some changes to the wording of the conditions as they appear within the agenda in relation to conditions 2, 3 and 5. Condition 2 refers to, the first sentence refers to the provision of a further survey. However, officers, and that was applied for consistency in relation to a previous decision, but officers are of the opinion in effect that we have sufficient knowledge of the biodiversity implications of the application as it stands. So it's proposed that that first sentence of condition 2 is removed, with just the part, the approved development shall undertake the mitigation measures, the remainder of the condition remaining in place. So those mitigation measures would still be necessitated to be carried out. In relation to condition 3, which is the condition which restricts the use, I would just recommend there that I add, in addition to the wording there, a suffix sentence at the start to say notwithstanding the provisions of the general permitted development order. And in relation to condition 5, which relates to the visibility displays, I propose to amend the wording of that condition to, in effect, make submission of the details and provision of the visibility displays to timed events. So I propose the wording: prior to the commencement of the development, a scheme for visibility displays for the modified accesses shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. The visibility displays shall be provided on site in accordance with the approved details prior to first occupation of the development and thereafter retained and maintained for the lifetime of the development. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kate. Members, did you all get that? Councillor Henry?
Yes, I just wanted to say a few words.
Just in particular, are you happy with the officers' change in conditions? Right. No, it's fine. So members were okay with those relatively minor changes to conditions. I'd like to try a little experiment with us at this point. I'd like us to deal with questions and comments all at the same time in the hope that we can perhaps speed up our deliberations. So if you were in a position to say, I am minded to support, but I didn't hear what condition 2 was, can we do it that way so that we tend to speak only once and then we can get back before breakfast? Okay, so breakfast tomorrow as opposed to breakfast in the week. So may I have speakers on this? Councillor Reid and Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. I know this road really well. Sorry, can I?
Sorry, Councillor Reid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. One thing that does concern me on page 33, which I was going to leave to my learned friend, but it says the current application is not accompanied by an ecological survey. Anyway, this particular road, it's not a road, it is a very narrow lane. It is used mainly as a rat run for people that don't live there. And as such, I know Ewhurst extremely well. It is an equestrian village. And you know, that the road is so narrow, there are many bends. It is just very, very dangerous for, I think one of the speakers, I think it was Mrs. Taplin, was explaining about the livery, which is opposite this site. It's just one of many, many liveries, over 80 horses. There's a menage and there's a sand school. The drainage is very bad. There is flooding in that area. There are many horse boxes that come along. They're very aware of how they should go very slowly, but the important thing is that there are children riding and having riding lessons. I was driving down there the other day, very aware of being very careful, and two boys, I think they were boys on motorbikes, came by, and really you can't even see round corners, so they're frightened the horses. You know, this is not a lane that's really suitable for huge vehicles. It's full of potholes too. So I don't, you know, I don't know how often highways repair it, but it is not suitable really for industrial traffic, in my opinion. And I think I've covered all the things I wanted to say. There is a footpath opposite as well. So there are many people walking in this area too. So, you know, all in all, I'm not really happy to support this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Reid. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. I am the ward member. I know this site and I know the surrounding area. And I requested a call in for this on a number of reasons. The environmental impact, the uncharacteristic development, and the sustainability or unsustainability. With regard to environmental impact, there is no water on site, there is no sewerage, so there will be quite a lot of mining jobs to enable the business to start up. A change of use from agricultural to light industrial, that's quite alien in a landscape like this, and we are in the AGLV. Sustainability, people will not come on their bicycles to work in these sheds. We're isolated from services, and the workforce, as I say, suggests will not be local people, and there will be quite a big generation, a significant increase in traffic commuting to this particular site. As people have said, along unsuitable lanes. As the ward member, I'm really concerned for the people that live opposite, the residents, and these are the people that live at Yard Farm. Yard Farm is a farm. They have sheep, they have chickens, they have children, they have staff, they have the livery, the equestrians business, which has been going for a good many years. And a lot of the horses are stable there, exercise there, and the owners probably come out at the weekends to ride them. And there are teaching facilities for young people as well. So the livelihood of the long-established stable could be at risk. Something that's not put in these papers here is the Airbnb, and that's another business. So you've got the horse business, you've got the bed and breakfast business. And for the bed and breakfast, people come out for the peace and tranquility of the area. And they're told that they can see the ducks paddling in the ponds, the potholes in North Breach Lane. So I'm really concerned with the effect that this change of use could have upon the livelihood and amenity and quality of the life of the people that live at Yard Farm. I'm aware that the Class E allows for mixed use to reflect changes in retail requirements. I'm not quite sure how this relates to the businesses within a rural community, and I'd like some understanding on that. So the repurposing of town centres and streets, yes, but how does this translate to Ewhurst, North Breach Lane? So I part there my concerns, and you can see that I'm quite worked up about it. I do live there, and I do understand the concerns, and thank you for letting me do my bit on it. And I'm a bit interested to see where the debate takes us. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Councillor Henry. And I think you've shown us the way to continue. At this point, Zach, is there a comment that you'd like your team to make? We can move on. Okay.
Sorry. If at the risk of embarrassing the officer, is reference to the 2019 MPPF should of course be the 2021 MPPF, and that's the same for Exeter house application as well. But that's what I'd say. Sorry, Kate.
All right, thanks. And we all put deliberate mistakes in here, just for you to spot them, Zach. Okay, I think I have a number of other speakers. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. I know this site fairly well. I did go and have a look at the outside of the site. I think that it can't be underestimated how narrow the road is there, and also how much it is used by people horse riding. And I think that whilst I can see that we're limiting it to Class E at the moment, looking at what Class E can do and the types of things, it's been mentioned about upholstery. Having done upholstery for a number of years, actually, I do know that the compressors on upholstery can be quite noisy, actually. So it isn't a quiet, completely quiet commercial entity. So I don't think, as well, during the application, we saw some of the farm, but what we didn't see was, as well as the red brick building, which is carrying out the B&B, that comes right onto the road and is right next to this where cars or vehicles will be coming and going. But also right on the other side, again, right next to the road, is actually the stables side onto the road there. And, we're very aware of how horses can be spooked. If anyone's done any riding at all, you know how a paper bag can blow and a horse can decide that it doesn't like it. So I think the awareness of what goes on in this area and the existing business that is running there and employing local people there, we need to have a huge sympathy for. And whilst, there was mention about if there were 20 horses in this particular building, I think the people that would be frequenting that would be people that were very sympathetic to equestrian pursuits. And it wouldn't be the same as somebody, perhaps a van, coming along to pick up, DHL or other particular people do exist as well, other couriers. But, it would be a very, very different kind of driver that was coming along using that roads, which is a tiny country lane. So I think sympathy towards the type of road there is, but also towards the business that's running there and has been running there for some time. I also am concerned a little bit about the visibility displays, because what wasn't shown on there is actually the people actually visiting their horses and going into the farmyard there are actually park on the side of the lane there and actually use that to park and then go into the livery yard. And I'm not sure, it was said about the visibility displays needing to be kept clear over 1 metre or something. And I'm not sure if that includes the area where the parking is occurring, because when I was there was quite a few Land Rovers parked, and I think they're about 1.8, 1.9, I don't know, something like that height. So perhaps that also needs to be taken into account. But I think that this barn is appropriate for agricultural use. But myself, bearing in mind the impact on the existing business there, I think that it would hugely impact that. And I have very big concerns about that. But I'm really happy to listen to, obviously, other members of the committee before making my final decision.
Thanks, Councillor. Now I have Councillor Goodridge and Councillor Seaborn, and I do forget which was first. Councillor Goodridge is ready to go, I can see.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think I recollect that those of us who were on the old Eastern had a site visit to this property in 2019. Certainly, I've been there on a site visit on the previous application, so do know the road because of that site visit, and of course took into account all the buildings around it when we decided the 2019 application. Various objections have been expressed on highways, and we have to remember that so far as highways are concerned, the County Council Highway Authority have no objections subject to conditions. And one of the conditions, and I don't know whether it was the Surrey Highways who asked for it, but one of the conditions, of course, is that the vans will be of a maximum size of 7.5 tons, which is covered in condition 7. And therefore, flowery language of enormous great lorries coming here needs to be read in context of condition 7. Also mention has been made that Class E is very wide, but again, this has been, a condition has been put on in condition 3, that it won't be the whole of use Class E, but for those that have been set out there and no other purposes within use Class E. So there are restrictions that this about what could happen. I am concerned about the welfare of the business the other side of the road, and haven't made my mind up as yet. But I think if we are proposing to refuse it, we can't refuse it on highways. That would be a very dangerous course to take in view of the Surrey County Council's expressed views already. I mean, for most responsible users of the highway, you drive within the of what you can see, and the examples of motorbikes rushing through here and it being a rat run is not the fault of the applicant and has nothing to do with the applicant. That is what's there already. So I think we just got to be slightly careful when we talk about highways matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. And last speaker, Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I echo the points that Councillor Goodridge has just made. I totally agree. We're yet again snarled up by hearing evidence that says roads aren't suitable, but the Highways Authority has said they are, and that's what we have to live with. So we've got the condition that was pointed out on weight. We've got the condition on use, and those two things are sort of pointing me in the direction of supporting, but interesting. I've moved quite a lot in my view during the course of the deliberations and might still move further yet. The main point I wanted to bring up was around one of the conditions, condition 8. It doesn't actually seem to tally with the reality of the application. So it's suggesting that there are 20% of the car parking spaces have electric charging points, but actually that probably equates to 2 charging points, I think, but we're looking at 4 units here. So it seemed to me to be more logical, if we are minded to approve, that condition be amended to 1 electric car charging point per unit, so that all units are treated in an equal manner. I don't know what colleagues think about that, but that would make rather more sense, because otherwise you can have 4 unequal units with 2 having, and we are very much interested in encouraging people to turn up to work in electric cars going forward. So I put that forward as a suggestion for a small amendment to condition 8. Beyond that, kind of like to hear some more debate, because I'm still a little uncertain as to which way to go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Denis, but before I call on you, officers, have you a thought on the suggestion by Councillor Seaborn on that modification to the electric charging points?
We've just been considering that point, and I think it would be possible to amend that condition to say four points will be provided, so one for each unit, which is less than the total provision of parking, but more than 20%.
So at this point then, members, are you minded to agree to that change recommended by Councillor Seaborne? Okay, thank you very much. And lastly, or very nearly lastly, Councillor Denis and then Councillor Will.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say to Councillor Seaborne, I'm not sure I'm going to convince him one way or the other, but to me, I'm very grateful for the ward members' input, which I think was a really good summary of the issues, and Joanna Cadman, obviously from the parish, that was very useful. And when I look at page 26, which is the consultations in Ewhurst and Ellens Green, a lot of what's been written there is sort of very pertinent for me. Unsustainable, inappropriate development in the location, impact on the building opposite, impact on the rural road. You know, I think they're really, really important issues. I appreciate the weight limits being put at 7.5 tonnes, but I can still say driving a 7.5 tonne lorry is still a fair old size for a country lane, having driven one myself. And of course, those can go up the country lane day or night. So it says no vehicles larger than 7.5 tonnes at any time. Well, we could have 7.5 tonnes going all day and all night. I know it's not, but you know, this is a rural area that could have 7.5 tonne lorries during the night time or evening. I am really concerned about this application, about its location, the impact, how it sits in the rural environment, its impact on the AGLV, its sustainability, and everything else. So I am concerned. And I'm not so sure people now will convince me otherwise, but I will listen to Councillor Wilson to see whether he can do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. I presume you can also have a 7.5 tonne horse box as well. But Councillor Wilson.
Well, once again, and I say it almost every time, thank you very much to Surrey Highways. Now, listening to the very valid points about safety, about horses, and about everything else, I think it's an awful situation to be in. But I have to ask the officers, can we find valid planning reasons to actually refuse this? Because I think that it would probably be going in front of an inspector, and if they get the same answer from Surrey Highways that this is a perfectly good road to have all this traffic, horses, children, bikes, motorbikes, I really don't know. If there is a valid planning reason, I think we should refuse it. If there isn't, I think we're just opening a can of worms. And I think it's a horrible position to be in. So once again, thank you, Surrey Highways. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Councillor, too. Well, we, of course, might not need any of that, Councillor Wilson, if we now come to a decision point. So the recommendation before us is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 8 with a modification in one of them and informatives 1 to 10. Thank you. Thank you. Kate, yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just condition 3 would add no other use within use class E or B. B was originally omitted and we thought it would be important to add that in. Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, sorry, Chairman, apologies for jumping in. Just there were a couple of questions or points made about how wide use class E is, and we accept that. That's what the whole purpose of condition 3 is to limit it to the only to be used for the light industrial or the storage and distribution use under use class B. So it couldn't be used for heavy industrial or retail or the other sort of use class E matters. So that was the whole point of that condition, to limit it solely to what's being requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Okay, members, then the recommendation is that permission be granted. May I see by show of hands those in favour of granting? Thank you. Those who object? Thank you. And any abstentions? Thank you.
Chairman, can I just let members know the Zoom for the council chamber has actually frozen, so I'm going to have to switch it off and back on again. That doesn't mean that the actual Zoom is not working, because that's going through my laptop, but it just means that you can't see anything on the screen. Okay.
Okay. Georgina, did you get the
247 against and 3.
members, please? Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an appeal with costs. So they've turned it down at committee. Right.
Of the existing business, and whether or not, you know, because it is a bed and breakfast and the windows actually open directly opposite and out onto this particular development, whether it is an inappropriate development at all in the countryside there. But I'm definitely needing some help from Zach. Thank you.
I think we're thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Is that okay? Sorry. I think I'd try and avoid the use of the word inappropriate, because obviously that has connotations in terms of greenbelt. But I certainly think that general amenity and the character of the countryside and the general environment, we can come up with something. I think Kat has actually drafted something roughly now, so I'll carry on talking while she give her a chance to do that. I think we would need to be a little bit cautious about specifying impact on existing businesses, but it can be wrapped up in the general amenity argument. I think partly is, you know, obviously it does have there are existing buildings there versus we're not introducing something new, and obviously those buildings could be used for agricultural purposes, and you know, and I think the point about I think
they're still talking about how they're going to.
Sorry, can you mute Mr. Simmons, please? Yeah, and so, but I would agree with members that on highway grounds, without a Surrey County Council support, we would find it very difficult to evidence that. And I would point out that obviously, if it was an agricultural use, that could have unfettered use of both weight of vehicles and trips. And you know, and I'm a rural boy, grew up in rural Somerset, and you do get tractors and trailers on the roads, and you would expect that. But this is about changing the character of the area, I believe, and Kat's hopefully going to come in with a suggestion now.
Hang on, members. Zach, have you?
Well, I think the question, just for everyone's benefit, the question was whether, Highways had actually done a site visit. I don't think we know the answer to that. So I think that's my honest answer.
Right, thanks. So, Kat, are you ready to help us through?
Chairman. I'm not sure whether to suggest that you lump those reasons all together or separate them, but I'll read out my suggestion, and obviously members, for you to
my suggestion is as one because it's all about the intrinsic character.
So the proposal, by reason of increased activity and the nature of the proposed use, would result in an unacceptable impact on the character of the AGLV and would fail to preserve the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, and would harm the amenities of neighbours by reason of increased noise and disturbance. Contrary to policies RE1, RE3.
We can clarify the exact policies.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kat. I have a question from Councillor Henry.
Yeah, just a suggestion. How about TDI, the safe and safe environment?
TD1?
Yeah.
That would be your sort of generic amenity reason policy. So yes, certainly TD1, along with your countryside AGLV policies. Yeah, that's correct. I mentioned those. Yeah, RE1, RE3 and TD1 would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. So, Kat, we're together on that. Members, do you want Kat to read it to you again, or are you prepared to take a vote on the recommendation? Ready? Okay. Well, the new recommendation, as Kat has read out, is before us. May I see by show of hands those in favour of this recommendation? And those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Georgina?
11 in favour, 2 against, no abstention.
So the original recommendation is lost. Thank you, members. We now move on to agenda item number 8. But before we do that, we spent an hour on that one. If anybody wishes to have a short break at this point, I think we're going to carry on. Is that right? Councillor Baker? Okay, right. Okay, so moving on then to 8.1, which is B1 WA 2021-0023 Exeter House. The proposal is for change of use from office, use class B1A, to 5 dwellings, use class C, with erection of extension as revision of WA 2020/1435. Kate, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for the slight delay there again. This application is for conversion of an existing office building into 5 dwellings. And as you all know from the papers, there's quite an extensive planning history on the site, including a prior approval, which was granted for conversion of the building into 4 dwellings. So here we can see. Sorry, we need to share the screen. Thank you.
Tuck, yeah.
Chairman, I'd just like to take this opportunity to apologise for the poor quality of the drawings reproduced on page 42 of the agenda. We'll seek to address that in future agendas.
The site is within the developed area of Cranley, close to the village centre, and it's adjoined by development to 3 or 4 sides in effect. So it is a relatively tight site, as those who are on site with us this morning will have seen. So the site is accessed via an access road which has existing parking to support the existing office to the side of the access road parallel to it. And as you can see, currently a number of vehicles are parked in front of the building at times in association with the office use, although no parking is proposed in that location as part of the application. So here we can see the front elevation as it presents onto Rowland Road. And here you can see the side elevation of the existing building, with the window you can see there at first floor level being obscure glazed. And this is one of the key considerations in relation to the assessment of the application. There is in effect a balancing exercise here, being the key issue that remains through the planning history, about the level of amenity for future residents of the development, particularly in terms of outlook and the potential for adverse impact on privacy to the neighbouring properties. The most recently refused application had a sole refusal reason in relation to the potential impact on privacy on the adjacent properties here to the north to Victoria Road, because the separation distance is only around, I believe, 16 metres, which is less than we would normally look for. Since that application, the applicant has amended the proposal so that the window you can see here, which is obscure glazed, could, in officer opinion, remain as obscure glazed, because it's now proposed to be a bedroom only, as opposed to a main living space, as it was with the previous application. And here you can see the plans as submitted by the applicant. There would be 5 flats provided, with the unit to the top floor having 2 bedrooms and the other units having only a single bedroom. We can see here, if I can move the cursor, here is the proposed extension, which would be a single story and relatively small in scale to the side there, with 2 flats at ground floor, 2 at first floor and 1 within the roof space. It's also proposed that there would be modifications in the form of dormers to be provided to the southern elevation to allow a stairway to be created, and to be provided to the western front elevation as an alteration to the existing dormer we saw within the roof space to the front elevation. And it's also proposed that roof lights would be inserted to the north, which would also be covered by a condition recommending obscure glazing of those windows because of the outlook to Victoria Road. And to confirm, the officer recommendation is to approve subject to conditions and informatives. And I also have just a verbal update for you. A slight amendment to the plans to correct an inconsistency was sought prior to the meeting, and that's now been undertaken. So the plan number in condition 1 should be amended from the plan 02 should be amended from revision C to revision E. Thank you very much, Chair. That's everything.
Thanks, Kate, and officers, thanks for arranging the site visit today. Members, comments, please. Councillor Goodridge.
I think I'm happy to defer to local members, because I always think it's tradition in committee that local members be allowed to speak first. But if Councillor Ellis wished to speak before me, I'm very happy.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to speak, so perhaps I will now. We are informed that the proposal is acceptable in principle, and I acknowledge that we are where we are in terms of the existing development on the site, which to my mind is very constricted, and car parking is a major concern and problem. With regard to the change of use from business to residential, a very significant number of properties, homes, have been built in Cranley over the last couple of years. And I'm very surprised there is not an increased need for the accommodation to be retained as for business use, as it is in use at the moment. And I understand that the current occupier of the property has been running a successful business for 3 years now. Perhaps the situation has changed since the application, we're told, was previously granted. One of my major concerns regarding the proposal is that should permission be granted, the existing residents of the surrounding very compact area will be seriously impacted in terms of increased noise and disturbance, overlooking and loss of privacy. As has been pointed out by the officer, the separation between this particular building and the residential properties is very small. At the moment, there's a large tree and some very extensive laurel hedging, but I don't think that we should actually depend on that being there to create privacy between the two properties. Another really serious issue is, I believe, the parking facilities that are already extremely limited and difficult on site. The proposal is to develop 5 flats with parking for, at a pinch, I would suggest 5 smaller vehicles, dictating that there will only be 1 car space per unit of accommodation and no space for visitors. You might suggest that visitors could park in the area around, but actually the opportunities for parking in the area around are extremely limited, and one might say actually almost non-existent. The nearby Victoria Road, it's strictly limited by permit to residents of Victoria Road, and this is rigorously enforced by the local authority. But there is also regular illegal parking in the day centre car park, which is also in Victoria Road, and this causes huge problems, and actually means that sometimes the elderly people needing to use the centre can't use it because the car parking spaces are all full. There are a number of issues that actually make me feel very unhappy about this application, but I will of course listen to what my colleagues have to say. There are 2 retail outlets facing onto Cranley High Street that have vital access to the rear of their premises through the car park associated with this proposal, and further difficulties in access would severely impact on their ability to conduct their business. The other business premise on the site has designated parking spaces that I feel could be severely impacted by the proposed parking layout that has been suggested. Another issue, and I'm sorry, as I said, there are a lot of issues that come to cause me concern. The suggested storage area for 10 wheelie bins plus 5 food waste containers that would be associated with 5 flats is adequate. and I strongly is inadequate. And I strongly suspect that larger shared bins would not fit into the designated area that has to be accessed via a gate. The refuse collection vehicles would not be able to access the bins through the car park, meaning that the bins would need to be taken to the road. And at that particular place, the pavement is, I believe, far too narrow for them to be left there. So I'm not sure where all of these refuse bins and food waste bins will be left. In my personal view, the existing development of this site is already problematic, and the change of use and the proposed extension, albeit quite a small and limited in size, and the proposed changes to the building would have an unacceptable impact on the existing businesses, and most importantly, on the residents living in very close proximity. I am grateful to the officers for arranging the site visits this afternoon, which was very helpful and very informative, and actually gave me some answers to some questions that have been raised in my mind. And I'll be very interested to hear my fellow members' views before I determine how I shall vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Now, Councillor Goodridge, Councillor Reid has indicated, and she comes from the far distant east side of Cranleigh. So, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got 2 points to make, and I reiterate what Councillor Ellis has said. It was very, very good having that site visit. I suppose my most major concern is the fact that what quality of life are those people going to have in that building, the people that are going to live on the first and upper floors with permanently glazed windows? You know, I'll leave that in the air. That is the obscure windows is a concern. And what light will they have? I was going to mention all the things that Councillor Ellis has made, all the points she's made, but the other main point, and it's come to me just this evening, we talked about parking, but we have to provide, or they have to provide, 5 electric charging points. Where in heaven's name are those going to be positioned in this very tight space? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Officers, can you just pick up on those 2 points? Councillor Reid suggested that at least one of the flats had completely glazed windows. Is that correct?
It is correct that obscure glazing is proposed to the windows to the northern elevation, and there's also existing obscure glazing to the eastern elevation, which faces onto another residential road. But that's not to say that all of the flats, or any of the flats indeed, would have no outlook. The restrictions to outlook would be to bedrooms or to secondary windows. So all flats would have at least one aspect to which they would have outlook. In relation to the electric vehicle charging point condition, I'm just going to check the wording. So yeah, so I've said each of the dwellings, and in condition 5, we're in effect looking for a scheme to be submitted there. So details would be needed at condition stage to show the siting as well as the power supply of the chargers, but they would be sited immediately adjacent to parking spaces. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. I have 2 more speakers, Councillor Goodridge and Councillor Townsend. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a dilemma here because on the one hand, we have the planning history. And if one looks at it purely on planning history, permission was refused for 5 units solely because of the overlooking to Victoria Road. They've changed the configuration, so the room that would have been a living room overlooking Victoria Road is now a bedroom, and with glazing fully glazed. So on the one hand, you'd be thinking, well, that solved the problem because all the other issues weren't raised previously, and therefore one should grant it. On the other hand, there's clearly 2 issues that are in the air. One is how they're going to park the cars, and secondly, how are they going to contain the bins? And those are important issues, because if they can't park 5 cars so that each flat's got a car space as a minimum, so we have a problem. So I'm sort of thinking at the moment that I would prefer to defer it, so that instead of having conditions that prior to development they'll submit plans which meet officers' approval, I would prefer to see those plans, see how they're going to fit them in, see how the wheelie bins are going to be fitted, see where the charging point's going to be, and then weigh it up as to whether this is acceptable development in this particular site. And the site visit was very useful. I can envisage, I mean, on the indicative plan on the bottom of page 42, it shows just York House, which is the, I think it's an office, but I think we decided it was empty at the moment. And they were going to park cars for this development all the way from the road right up to in front of the front door of York House. Now, if I was a tenant of York House or an occupier of York House, I wouldn't actually fancy someone's 4x4 parked within about 2 feet of my front door, and could obliterate the light too from the front window. And therefore, I do think it's important that we know where these cars are going to be, particularly bearing in mind, as Councillor Ellis has said, that we have to provide access for, I think it's Oxfam and another development who back onto this area and have got to have free passage. And there are other people's wheelie bins, I suspect. I mean, we couldn't, well, because it was locked, we couldn't see around the side where they're going to put the wheelie bins in. But even if it had been unlocked, we would have had to move about 6 enormous commercial bins to get to it. And I don't know how many of the bins that were there that we saw this afternoon were bins operating from Exeter House, and how many of the bins were actually from other commercial enterprises that are there. And so I'd like to see all that. And I'm therefore minded at the present, subject to officers' input, to defer this so that instead of it being a condition, we actually face it head on now and get that information before we make our mind up. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Goodridge, are you minded to make put forward a motion for deferral?
I am.
And we have a seconder. Okay. Is there anybody who is not seconding who would like to? Okay, so we have a motion for deferral.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Chairman. Can I just clarify that the reason for deferral is to seek clarification on matters of access to the parking, access to what's the York House, storage and presentation of refuse, and location positioning of electric vehicle charging points. They're the points that you're seeking clarification on with the deferral.
Am I
Councillor Townsend has a
sorry, am I
suggestion.
able to add something if Councillor Goodridge doesn't mind? When we were on the site visit, we did ask for clarification about access for emergency services and the distance from the road to the particular building. And I would very much hope that we could include that within Councillor Goodridge's reasons for deferral. Thank you.
Happy to agree that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, can I just hop in? I was looking at the size of one of the flats, which has given us justification to actually have one less parking space than we would normally ask for. It says that it's under the NDSS standard, but it's not recommended by the officers that we use that for a reason. But going on to the parking status, because we're going to consider it a one-person unit, which actually it isn't down on the plans, we are going to accept one less parking space in this small space as well. So I wonder if we could add that to our
we'll pick that up, Chairman.
debates. And the other thing I'd like to say is when I wake up in my bedroom, if my window was obscured, I wouldn't know whether or not it was raining and whether or not I should be getting up.
We'll consider that also, Councillor.
Councillor Seaborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully behind everything that's happened, but just in the interest of tidiness for when it comes back to us, can I point out that unless planning nomenclature is different to standard geographical and geophysical nomenclature, the scale for the block plan is wrongly labelled. I think it's shown as 1 to 100. I think it's 1 to 200.
We'll certainly double check that. Thank you, Councillor, for pointing that out.
Thanks, Councillor. So, members, we have, unless we've already done that, we have a motion to defer. May I see those in favour of deferral? Thank you. And unless I'm miscounted, those against? None. And no objections? None. Thank you. So that's unanimous for deferral. Thanks, members. Right. Moving on quickly then to 8.2, item B2, WA 2021-01674, 41 Oxford Ridge. The proposal is for the extension of the single-storey rear extension. Susie.
This item has been brought to committee as it falls outside the scheme of delegation as the agent is related to a member of staff. The proposal is for a single-storey rear extension on 41 Oxford Ridge. The application site is located on the northwestern side of Oxford Ridge. The property is a semi-detached two-storey dwelling with off-street parking. The application proposes the rear extension would measure 4.5 metres deep by 5 metres wide with a ridge height of 3.6 metres and an eaves height of 2.4 metres. You can see in these pictures the rear of adjoining property 42 Oxford Ridge in the bottom left-hand side. There are 2 windows and a door, and the inside picture showing the very small kitchen open to what would have been a dining room next to it, so there is light coming in. So this is just showing the block plan of the proposal. The proposed rear on the bottom right-hand corner, and the proposed side, and the floor layout. So the applicant's agent has supplied this block plan showing the 45-degree line, which is drawn from the furthest window within the rear extension to number 42, which is a conservatory. There is a closer window at number 42, and the 45-degree line would be breached. However, officers considered that since, on balance, taking into account the orientation of the application site, the limited height of the extension above the boundary treatments, and the secondary nature of the closest window, the impact on 42 Oxford Ridge would be acceptable. So officer's recommendation is approval subject to conditions.
All right. Thanks very much. Members' comments, or do we move straight to Councillor Baker?
Thank you. Thank you for the comments, officers. I'd just like to know about whether, well, in fact, I see that no objections have been received. I'm just wondering if we know whether the next door neighbour whose light we've just seen illustrated in the drawing has, well, they've certainly not made a comment, but have they been made aware of this proposal? Personally, I don't have problems with it, but I think we ought to find that out if we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Officers, I imagine it's a statutory requirement to let her.
Yes, the neighbouring properties have been notified, and in fact, I met with the neighbouring property daughter. The mother is actually deceased. So I met with her and discussed it, and the buyers, I mean, it's probably not relevant to this, but the buyers are proposing the same extension for that property at number 42.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did think that might be the question,
right,
that it was something else might be forthcoming.
Thank you, Councillor. Members are reminded to move then to a recommendation, to a vote. The recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 and 2 and 1 informative. May I see by show of hands those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Yeah, thank you. So that recommendation is accepted. Thank you very much. And lastly, but by no means least, 8.3, item B3, WA 2021-01523, which is 22 Mary Vale, Godalming. The proposal is the erection of extension and alterations to elevations and fenestration at this address. Susie.
So this item has been brought to committee as it falls outside the scheme of delegation as the agent is related to a member of staff. 22 Mary Vale in Godalming is proposing a first floor side extension above an existing room. The application site is located on the southern side of Mary Vale cul-de-sac. The application property is a two-storey detached brick-built dwelling with off-street parking for 2 vehicles. You can see in the pictures on the left is number 21, and where the car is, that's where the proposed first floor extension will be situated. And there's a block plan proposal. So the proposed first story extension will just introduce a bedroom and a bathroom, measuring 4.8 meters wide by 6.6 meters deep, with a total ridge height of 6.8 meters, which would be set down for the main ridge. There'd be no impact on neighbouring property at 21 Mary Vale, since their side window is a secondary window. So officer recommendation is approval subject to conditions.
Thanks, Susie. Any comments, members? Or shall we move then to the recommendation, which is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 3 and informatives 1 to 2. May I see by show of hands those in favour? I think that's unanimous, isn't it? Yep. So that is carried. Thank you all very much. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you for the person in the